So I told you earlier that we were having a lively discussion in our Sunday school class this morning, and that was why I was a minute or two late getting up on stage to welcome you to our service. And I will confess that I didn't really plan for that discussion and this sermon to line up as well as they did, but we were talking about, in Sunday school today, the question or the problem, as it were, of evil, of why do bad things happen? And where is God in the midst of all of that? This is an interesting question because it really does apply to so much of the questions that friends that I have who don't believe in Jesus, this is often at the core of their reason for unbelief. What's interesting to me is that the Bible itself seems to wrestle with this idea of why do bad things happen to good people. On the one hand, we have a book like the Proverbs, which basically says, look, if you do everything right, if you live your life wisely, all will go well for you. I mean, that's basically the point of the book of Proverbs. Live the right way, things go well. But immediately following the book of the Proverbs, we have books like Ecclesiastes. Not too long before the book of the Proverbs, we have books like Job. Our Bible has books like Lamentations, where good people stand before God and they cry out, why is this happening? Where are you, God? I mean, Job, we are told, is a man without fault. And we go, well, that's kind of weird. I thought Jesus was the only one like that. But Job, we're told, is a man without fault. He's done nothing wrong. And bad thing after bad thing after bad thing happens. And I will confess to you that as I read the Bible, it seems to me that part of what the Bible is saying is sometimes bad things just happen to good people. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Sometimes, there's that famous quote, everything has a reason, or everything happens for a reason. And my favorite kind of cynical response to that is that, yeah, sometimes that reason is you're dumb and make bad decisions. But as a pastor, I will confess to you that sometimes bad things happen and there's no reason that I can find. So what do we do? What do we do in the midst of that? What do we do when bad things happen? What do we do in the midst of tribulation? What do we do when loved ones die? What do we do when loved ones get sick? What do we do when we get sick? What do we do when things don't go the way we think they should? Sometimes things don't go the way the Bible tells us they should, and we go, hey, God, this doesn't feel like the way you want this to go. Why? I think Psalm 13 gives us a response to the problem or the question of evil. Mark my words, it's not the only response. Okay, I'm going to say up front, this is not the only response. I've been around the church long enough to know that preachers like to say, I have the one answer. I have the one answer for you to take home, and this is how you get through this Monday through Saturday for the next however long you live. I know of a guy who wrote a book called the 21 Irrefutable Laws. Really? Irrefutable? Quite the claim. I don't make any such claim. I believe that Psalm 13 is a response, but it is not the only response. But what do I mean by that? Psalm 13 is a psalm of lament. We've looked at psalms of lament together. We've looked at a personal lament. We've looked at a communal lament. We're going to look at this one today, but I want to come at this from a slightly different angle. What is a lament, you might be asking? Lament is kind of an exclamation that things are not the way they should be. We have a whole book of our Bible full of laments. It's called Lamentations. If you've ever looked at that book and gone, why does this book have kind of a weird name? That's why. It is a collection of laments. The prophet Jeremiah, there's a whole section of his book of prophecy that are laments over the way things are. And the Psalms, as I was preparing to preach this week, I found one statistic that said that upwards of 25% of the Psalms are personal laments. That's a lot. That means in a book of 150 Psalms, more than 32 of them are about things being wrong. And here's why I think this is a response to the problem of evil. We're going to look at this today. We're going to go kind of verse by verse a little bit, and then we're going to talk about it at the end, okay? The psalm begins, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul, have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long will my enemy be exalted over me?" Verses 1 and 2 of this psalm, these are rhetorical questions. How long, God? You ever been in a how long situation? How long will I go without a job? How long must I do chemotherapy? How long must I wait for a child? How long is COVID going to last? We've been in how long situations. This psalm meets us in our how longs. It meets us. And it gives us permission. I want to remind you that the Psalms were given to us. The Holy Spirit has said these are inspired. Take them, read them, use them. And here's what that means. You have biblical permission to complain to God. The psalmist is going, "God, I've been waiting a long time. I've been waiting. I have been in this situation too long. Where are you? How long?" That question, how long, it's made 4 times in 2 verses. David continues. "Consider, answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. My enemy will say, I have prevailed, and my foes will rejoice because I'm shaken." In the middle of this psalm, in the middle of this lament, we find the request. We find the petition. We find the desire. Consider, answer, give. You have biblical permission to ask for what you need. You have biblical permission to say, "God, I don't think you're thinking about me enough. I don't think you're giving me what I need. I don't think you're answering me." You have biblical permission to say, "God, show up." I wonder how long David went between writing verses 4 and 5. There's a period at the end of verse 4, isn't there? I wonder how long that period is. We're not told. If you've ever written a poem or composed a song, you know that they're rarely done all at once, right? Unless you're Chicago and you're looking to fill out your EP or your LP, and so you write a song about how it's 25 or 6/4. It's my favorite album by Chicago. Anyway, very few songs, very few poems are composed all at once. I wonder how long David waited with anger and frustration and disorientation and pain between verses 4 and 5. Because in verse 5, we switch to past tense. I trusted you in your steadfast love. My heart will rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he dealt bountifully with me. I wonder how long the time between 4 and 5. Lauren and I had our first false alarm for baby number 4 yesterday. If you're asking me, it's a little early for that to start. We had 6 false alarms with Junia. I hope that we're not, looking to make that worse. We had our first one yesterday. We're sitting in the, L&D side of the St. Mary's Hospital. They've done all sorts of tests to see if Lauren's actually in labor or if this is, false labor. And they say, all right, we're going to come back in 2 hours. Great. Well, the 2-hour mark comes and goes. We get a little antsy, like, what does that mean? Bad things? like, what does that mean? Lauren says, Adam, can you go out to the desk and just see, what's going on? I'm kind of ready to go home. Lauren's already sure we're coming home. So I go out and I say, hey, I'm just checking. And the lady says, hey, I'm really sorry that we haven't come in to check on you yet. There's an emergency happening on this floor. There's an emergency happening with a woman in labor right now. And so our doctors are all trying to make sure that goes well. You kind of quickly are no longer frustrated. Our baby's fine. But there's a mom and a dad on this floor having an emergency at the birth of their child. I was an emergency C-section. My mom was in labor for 29 hours. She's a saint. And my heart began stopping every time she had a contraction. And they said, okay, we got to cut him out now. I've been a handful since day one. So when they tell me that there's an emergency happening on this floor, I immediately realize that things could be worse. I immediately realized that I'm uncomfortable. Lauren's uncomfortable laying in a hospital bed. We're tired. We're bored. Our phones are almost out of battery. But it could be worse. And I began wondering, as the time went on and they still hadn't come talk to us, I began to wonder if that mom and that dad were going, how long, God? How long is this emergency going to last? How long? How long? Where are you? Answer me. Consider me. Give me a child. After about 20 to 25 minutes, if you've never been on a birth wing, when a baby's born, most birth wings have a lullaby play. When they move a mom from the delivery room into their room where they'll be for the next couple of days, they let a mom hit a button that plays a nursery rhyme. After about 25 minutes after I asked this nurse how long, nursery rhyme played. And you go, okay, God, I trusted in your steadfast love and you answered somebody. I began to imagine what that mom must have felt like. I've been through it. The last 20 minutes, the last hour perhaps, I don't know how long that emergency lasted. I only know I asked when I did. And I began to realize that there might be a big pause between where I'm frustrated and when God answers. Maybe it's minutes, maybe it's hours, maybe it's days. But the act of lament, the act of going to God and saying, God, things are not as they're supposed to be. This is a way that we as Christians stand up to what's wrong in the world. And like Gandalf on the bridge of Barad-dûr say, you shall not pass. You go no further. I am standing in front of you, and I am going to God, and I am saying that this is not okay. Lament is a gift that God has given to us. Because in the act of lament, we tell God exactly what God needs to know. Walter Brueggemann says that is, of course, where all serious prayer originates. In the act of telling God what God needs to know. That is what it means to pray seriously. See, this is how I think lament is an answer to the problem of evil. I don't have a good answer of why things are the way they are, but I can stand in front of it and say, you will go no further. I am standing here. I am calling upon the power of the only one I know who can stop you. See, oftentimes lament is considered an act of deep unfaith. I am convinced that it is an act of deep faith. Because in lament, I stand before what is wrong and I say, God, stop it. Stop this thing. And when I do that, my faith is, of course, in God. God is the one who I have addressed. God is the one who I trust to solve it. It is only God who can stop what is wrong. That is what David sees around him. He doesn't say, God, I did this thing. God, I will do this thing. God, I'll get myself out of this problem. He says, God, I feel abandoned by you. Things are not as they should be. Lament is one of the Christian answers to bad things happening. Because in that way, we stand up and we offer resistance to evil, to pain, to suffering. Now, at the risk of being too much of a downer, sometimes that problem of evil, like the Balrog, sorry if this is too much Lord of the Rings for y'all, but sometimes that bridge falls apart and we go down with the Balrog. But we still stood there and we said, you will not go any further. This is it. This is as far as you go unanswered. I lament, I call upon God. Answer me. And ultimately, here's why I think God has given us this answer to the problem of evil. Because God himself suffered. Christianity is the only religion which says God does not stay up there. God does not stay far away from us. Christianity is the only religion that says God became a person fully, and God came and he lived among us. We're told that Jesus dealt with the things that we dealt with. Jesus had friends who got sick. His dad apparently dies while he's still at home growing up. He sees nothing but hardship around him. Jesus is not the first person to be crucified. That was something that happened all the time. Jesus was familiar with death and pain and sorrow and heartache. But he didn't just see it. He subjected himself to it. Jesus got on a cross, or was nailed to a cross and they put him up. You know what I mean. Jesus was on a cross and he died. Not just kind of died. Not just mostly dead. He was all dead. He was all dead for 3 days. He fully died. And if you think it was easy for God to watch Jesus die, I've got questions. I don't care if God the Father knew Jesus was coming back. It's not easy to watch your kid hurt. It's not easy. You see, we worship a God whose answer to evil is solidarity. We worship a God whose answer to bad things is, I'm in it with you. And by the way, that's not something that Jesus started. We're going to look at Psalm 23 next week, I believe, which of course has that famous, even though you are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, you're with me. Right? God's been with us in the midst of heartaches for as long as we've been in the midst of heartache. The answer, we can go to God in lament because God has promised to be with us. We can say, hey, God, in case you forgot, He's promised to be with us. And here's what's so important about this. God's answer to suffering is solidarity. God's answer to pain is that He joins us. God's answer to death is that He subjected Himself to it to raise us out of it. God's answer is to go suffer with. And so He leaves a community behind who He promises to return for. But it is our response to evil to suffer with as well. It's so interesting to me that this psalm is a personal lament. There's only first-person pronouns here. This is all about David. But we are told that he wrote this to the leader. He wrote this personal lament for the community to sing. Even in his singular pain, he brought it to the community. The words compassion and sympathy, they mean basically the same thing, but one of them is Latin and one of them is Greek. They mean with, that's sim and cum, and they mean suffer or feel, pathos, passion, or pascha. You see, Jesus invites us to the habit of sympathy and compassion, to suffer with, to feel with, to be with, because God's answer to evil is to suffer with, and promises to bring out eventually. You see, make no mistake, Christians, we can suffer. We can see suffering and we can acknowledge it as a true problem as a person. That it is possible to suffer and it is not a good thing. But what we do is we suffer with the knowledge and the framework that the worst thing is never the last thing. The last thing is salvation. This psalm begins with the worst thing. I'm alone. I've been this way a long time. I will sleep the sleep of death. My enemies will rejoice. But it ends with the best thing. Steadfast love. Salvation. And so I want us as a church to be a people who welcome the attitude of lament among our brothers and sisters, who welcome the attitude of pain and hardship, who welcome the problems of suffering, who welcome the communication that says, God, how long? How long? How long? In those answers, we'll find God's answer. Or in those questions, we'll find God's answer. But make no mistake, God wants all of you. That means your hardships and your happiness. God doesn't want you to only come to God when you're thrilled with life. He wants you to come to God when you feel like you're at the end of your rope. And He wants you. He invites you to say, how long? It's my conviction that the church, not just like Westwood, but like Christianity across the world, we have often lost our ability to lament. We've lost our will and words to lament. We've not made it normal or valuable. We see it as an act of doubt instead of an act of faith. But I believe it's an act of deep faith because in lament we put our pain, disorientation, and fears on God's lap. We're going to prepare for communion with a new song today. I told you we made this change late in the week. We're going to sing a song, or we're going to be led in a song. Sing whenever you feel like you've learned it. That's based on this psalm, actually. It's based on Psalm 13. I'm so grateful that there are, people writing worship music who are taking the hard psalms and leading us and singing them because they're part of our Bible. They're part of our songbook, as it were. So I hope that as we sing songs like this, we can better make lament, we can better make our vocalization of our problems a norm among church life. Over 20% of our hymn book in the Bible says, God, where are you? It's okay for you to ask that. It's okay for us to ask that. And in so doing, we stand in the midst of hardship and we say, you will go no farther.